Sandy, are we expecting questions?
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our new knowledge session. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital. And if you're not familiar with us, we are a community development financial institution focused on lending, innovation services, investing, and more. I'm happy to have been a partner in this program since the start. It's hard to believe that we started this professional development program in 2014 and what we've accomplished during that time. It was originally created to support businesses that took place that have participated in the Washington County Business Challenge, which will announce the winners of our 9th season next month. Looking forward to that. But we did this to help businesses and individuals looking at starting a business to continue growing professionally and build their skills. And we average 20 to 22 sessions a year. These sessions are recorded, and just wanted to let people know that we are recording this today for education and training purposes. Also, as a way to keep things flowing and to help our presenter, we do have everybody muted and their cameras off, but we do want, this is a workshop, so if you have questions for our presenter today, please post those in the Q&A section, and we will address those either during or especially after the session. Today, I'm happy to have my cohort in this program, Kathy Lowe. Kathy is the Executive Director of the Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and let her introduce our speaker and moderate for the day. So thank you.
So new market tax credits is a word that I hear on a regular basis, and I know just a tiny little bit about it, but not enough. And I'm thrilled to have Emma Wyatt here with the Innovate Fund, and she'll tell you a little bit about the Innovate Fund. Emma is a native of Southwest Virginia, and she now lives on a farm. If you all were here in our chat, she lives on a farm here in Abingdon. And we are very lucky to have Emma to be our presenter today. So without further ado, Emma Wyatt.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak and attend this meeting today. I see some familiar faces in the attendees section, so hello to all of you, and it's good to see you all. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. All right, so Kathy or Sandy, can you give me a thumbs up? Do you all see the actual PowerPoint slide?
You're up.
Yes,
that's great.
Okay, very good. Thank you, guys. So we'll just dive right in. Today, we are talking about new market tax credits. This is a program that is designed to help businesses and communities fund projects in low-income places. So I'm talking about projects like business growth, new buildings, renovations. And as we get through the presentation, you'll see some more of the examples. But think about this and as you're going through the presentation of, I'm in a low-income community. I'm in Abingdon and these surrounding places. Where's an eyesore that I know a program like new market tax credits could help? Or what business do I know that's trying to grow that would really benefit from the new market tax credit program? So I work with the Innovate Fund. We are a new market tax credit provider. We're based in Greenville, South Carolina, but as everyone was saying, I'm sitting here in Abingdon. So the new market tax credit program was created in the year 2000. It is part of the tax code. It's not a permanent part. I'm not one to typically say that reading tax code is fun, but this is a digestible section. So feel free to check it out in section 45D. It is currently on a 5-year extension with hopes that it will become a permanent extension or permanent part of tax code within this year. So we're looking forward to some updates there. But the thought of the program when it was created, 22 years ago was when we have an investor who's seeking the greatest return on investment, and they're looking between a low-income community like Abingdon, Virginia, or a thriving community like Charlotte to locate their business or to put their investment dollars, how can we convince them that putting that money in Abingdon is the better investment? The new market tax credit does exactly that. it provides essentially a subsidy to where making investments in low-income communities makes better sense for that investor who's seeking that return. So there's a couple players involved in the new market tax credit program. We first have the CDFI Fund, which is a department of the US Treasury. They permit taxpayers to take a credit against their federal income tax liability in return for making qualified equity investments. Now, none of that sounds easy or simple, but we'll break it down here in just a second. So the CDFI Fund works with community development entities, or CDEs. This is the hat that I wear in the new market tax credit industry. The Innovate Fund is a community development entity. So that means every year we write applications to the CDFI Fund asking for allocation of new market tax credits. Now, when we ask for this allocation, we're asking for huge amounts, $100 million, $75 million, $50 million. And we'll hopefully get allocation in the form of tax credits. If we win, we don't get a $50 million check. We get the ability to sell $50 million of tax credits to an investor. Those investors are typically large banking institutions like US Bank, Chase, Wells Fargo, Capital One. And these banking institutions want the tax credits because they get a 39% reduction in their tax liability for the tax credits they buy. So in return, they're going to pay us a market rate. So we've sold them our tax credits, they pay us a market rate. And with that money that they've paid us with that market rate for the tax credits, we can take and make investments in low-income businesses or communities. And we do this through a vehicle called a Qualified Active Low-Income Community Business, or QUALC-B. That's the first thing we're going to learn from the new market tax credit industry. The acronyms are silly, so be prepared for some silly sounding words. Now, this is a gap funding program. The new market tax credits is not the shining answer from the stars that will solve all of your development hurdles, but it can come in at the end and help you fill that gap. So we tell people that the new market tax credits can bring about 20 to 30% of your total development cost to your project, meaning 70 to 80% has to come from you all, from some sort of, we call it the leverage. So whether that's your bank loans, that's grants, it's equity, it's a bridge of multiple grants. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but this is a part of the program where people struggle a lot, because asking a community, especially a small community, to even come up with 70% of a total development cost can be a heavy lift. So in summary, we have the investor. This is the large banking institution. This is never the high net worth individuals in town. This is always large institution. You have the community development entity. In this case, there are about 300 active community development entities across the country. So the Innovate Fund is just one. There is another one in Abingdon, and that's People Incorporated Financial Services. So there's many, and that's helpful because not all of us get allocation. So sometimes projects have to shop around to find a CDE who likes their project and who has active allocation and can work with them. But basically, at the end of the day, the CDE does have to have a primary mission of serving low-income communities. And then last but not least, this is probably the part of the conversation you all are identifying with, and that's being a qualified active low-income community business, or QUALC-B. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this a second ago, but we can work with many different entities to be a QUALC-B. It could be a business, a corporation, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a unit of local government. There are many different ways this program can work. It's very flexible. So what does it mean to be a QUALC-B and all of these words that fill in the acronym? So first we have qualified active. We cannot do sin businesses. This is the same example that you see with many government programs. We can't do country clubs and golf courses and hot tub facilities and suntan facilities. The gambit that you hear, we can't fund that. You'll see the little barn on this diagram. We can't fund agriculture programs. And then a big one, we can't fund purely rental real estate for residential real estate. We can fund mixed use. There is a certain threshold that has to be met as far as your mix between residential and commercial tenants, but we cannot do purely apartment building. All right, qualified active. Okay, low income community. That's what we're looking at now. What does it mean to be a low income community? This is a mapping tool that's easy to find online just by typing in new market tax credit mapping tool. There's several that might come up. And what this picture is showing us is in the Abingdon town boundaries here, we have three colors. We have the pink color, which means that census tract is a severely distressed census tract. We have the yellow color. That means it is eligible for new market tax credits, but it doesn't meet an additional characteristic of distress. And then the gray, and the gray means it is not eligible for new market tax credit investment. So you can see a large portion of our town is in this pink color. This is being based on census tracts. So we're looking at the percent of people in poverty, the median family income, and the unemployment rate of that census tract. Other characteristics of distress do come into consideration for CDEs looking to invest in low income places. And some of those might be being in a brownfield, being in an ARC distressed area, being in a medically underserved area. So the list is quite long, and this is not exhaustive. So if you feel as though your idea of a project is in a new market tax credit area, but you're not quite sure, we can easily have that conversation. And I'll add here, opportunity zones are a word that exists in the same world as new market tax credits, but it's not the same thing. So I know there are a couple opportunity zones scattered throughout Washington County, but there are many more new market tax credit eligible areas than there are opportunity zone areas in our area. Okay, and last but not least, we have business. So we talked about qualified, active, low income community, and now we're looking at what we can actually consider to be this business. New market tax credit financing can really be used to pay for anything that has to deal with picking up and building a building. So it can be real estate acquisition, site prep, rehab, new construction, tenant build out, some equipment and soft costs. But the thought of it is when we're making our investments in low income communities, real estate is pretty safe because it's pretty unlikely you're going to pick the building up and move it across the street, even though we did just see that last year in Abingdon. So we are looking at real estate type projects. Oh, and I will add here, projects typically need to have a total development cost of at least $5 million in order to attract adequate interest from new market tax credits. And we'll get into that in just a second when we talk about the financials and how it works. But basically, we are looking at really large development projects. At the end of the day, though, when we're evaluating projects, we're asking one big question as a CDE, a community development entity. We're asking, how does this project build community capacity? And that looks different in every community. Our community in Abingdon, we might not need another, commercial development strip mall, but a small community in the coal fields of Southwest Virginia or West Virginia, they might not have a place that has a place to buy socks and cucumbers and go to the dentist. So it always looks different for each community. But if you all can tell us a story about how this project is enhancing community capacity, whether that be through creating jobs or creating an actual community facility, then we typically can underwrite based on those, what you know as the expert in your area. Okay, so this is my worst but favorite slide of the presentation. We're going to talk about how the money works in a new market tax credit transaction. This is very surface level and it's basic for the transaction, so it does get pretty complicated. So we'll just do an ideal case scenario. And Sandy and Kathy, I don't have the questions or anything popping up. So if people are asking questions or if anyone wants to ask a question, please interrupt.
Will do.
Okay, so let's pretend that we're doing a $10 million development. $10 million is an average allocation size, and it's a desirable amount. Most CDEs who are deploying allocation want to be in that $10 to $12 million range. Maybe 8 to 12 would be a more fair range, because we want to be able to do a project that's going to have a lot of impact, and we'll get to that. Okay, so $10 million allocation. The CDE really likes your project. We say, yes, we'd like to give you allocation. So we go out and sell our tax credits. We sell these to the investors. These are the institutions like SunTrust or Truist now, US Bank, Chase, Wells Fargo, and they get a 39% reduction in their tax liability. This tax liability reduction is taken over a 7-year period. So that is the compliance period of the new market tax credit transaction, 7 years. So the math we've got going on here right now is 10 million multiplied by 39% for a total of $3.9 million. So we talked about the market rate earlier. The investor pays a market rate for these tax credits. In this example, I have the market rate laid out at 82 cents. So the math is $10 million multiplied by 39%, multiplied by 82 cents of the market rate. So the amount of equity that the new market tax credit allocation will bring to this project is $3.198 million. This money goes into an investment fund. The investment fund is a vehicle which initiates the transaction for the new market tax credits, and it is owned by the investor. But because this is the initiator of the transaction, we need to have $10 million in this investment fund. So the other $6.802 million of investment needs to come from this leverage that we talked about sourcing in the beginning. This could be commercial bank loans, it could be grants, it could be equity, you name it, we've seen it done. We closed a deal yesterday, actually, that we saw a lot of opportunity zone equity come in as a contribution. So there's ways to mix programs, and we've also worked with many projects before that have taken advantage of Appalachian Regional Commission funding as part of their leverage. So now in this investment fund, we have the magic number of $10 million, and we flow that down through the sub-CDE to the Qualic B in the form of 2 loans. The first loan is this A loan. It mirrors the terms of the leverage loan. So if you got bank debt at 6%, this A loan will look, smell, taste, feel like bank debt at 6%. The B loan is what makes this program super attractive. Because the investor only cares really at the end of the day about that 39% reduction in their tax liability, this $3.198 million that they paid for that reduction is really not what they're interested in. So at the end of the 7-year period, this is essentially, I'm not going to, no accountants on the phone, call the IRS when I say this, please, but it is essentially a forgivable loan. So at the end of the 7-year period, there is a put call option in place where the investor and the CDE can exit the deal, and the B loan, the residual value of the B loan resides with the Qualic B. So you can essentially think of this like debt with equity features. Now, over the 7-year period, which is the compliance period, the A and the B loan are blended together, and the project only pays interest during the 7-year period on that blended rate. Because the B loan is essentially equity type debt, and the A loan is coming in as perhaps traditional debt, perhaps grants, perhaps equity, this blended rate is quite low most of the time. We could see a blended rate average of maybe 2.5%, and you were paying interest only during the 7-year period. So it's pretty attractive. You get the residual value of the B loan at the end of 7 years. You have this interest only payment period where the project can ramp up over 7 years. But there's always a but. And in this one, its transaction costs are quite high. So on a deal that's $10 million, you easily could expect $800,000 in transaction costs. These costs are to pay the CDE's success fees and asset management fees. It's to pay all of the lawyers and accountants who are part of the deal to go through the structuring and help you actually close it. But it also can set aside reserves to where the project can reserve the payments it has to make during the 7-year period. So these transaction costs do not come out of the A loan. They come solely out of the B loan. So the residual value I was talking about of that B loan is essentially this $3.198 million minus these transaction costs that are being eaten up out of the equity contribution. Okay, that is all that's going to be added to this slide. Are there any questions before I keep going?
So So let me see if I get this straight. So when you say an investor, it's not generally private investors, but banks that are investors in projects.
So there are a couple ways. Yes. So this investor that we have on the screen who's buying the tax credits, the tax credit purchaser is never the person in Abingdon who is, trying to develop a project. The qualifiee, though, the person who is actually building the project or, leasing the building or whatever, that person is always local tenant, local person.
Right.
So the way the local person is involved in this program is by participating in coming up with the project.
Right. So I guess my question is, so when you're talking new market tax credits, though, you're not talking, person A needs a $10 million loan and person B it is a wealthy individual who wants tax breaks. They
Right.
can't be the investor.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That's what I was getting around to. So it has to be like a bank.
That's right. But so it's unlike historic tax credits and opportunity zones in that person B, the investor, cannot participate in buying the tax credits.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. We have another question. And so there is a component of interest income coming back to the leverage lender. Can you explain that?
Yep. So when you are making the interest payments on the blended rate of the A and the B loan, they are quarterly interest payments. They come back up through the sub-CDE and to the investment fund. So if the leverage is all grants, let's say you got all of your money as equity and grants coming to the project, then the interest payments that's being made during this flow back up through the structure essentially comes back to the leverage lender, who can then just circle it back through and keep making that payment. But if the leverage loan was a bank, then the interest income coming up through the structure will essentially go to pay the interest on that bank loan. There are fees taken out at every level. There's asset management fees at the sub-CDE level. They vary depending on what CDE you're working with. And then there is, I think, a small investment fund management fee that comes out. So the full amount of the interest payment does not come to the bank or through the structure, but a portion of it will. So the interest rate that we're working with, the blended rate, is set based on whatever the terms of what this leverage is. So it could likely be that you're making extremely low, close to 1% interest payments if you're having mainly equity and grants and very little debt. And the more expensive this debt is, the more expensive interest you're going to be making, interest payment you'll be making. Sarah, I saw that question was from you, so we can have that conversation in more detail if you have more questions about it. Any other questions on this slide? I'll keep going. If not, we can come back to whatever after we get through some more slides. Okay, we'll keep moving on. Okay, so how can your project, how can you, the person A in the community who has the idea of redeveloping an eyesore or expanding your business or just starting a new business, how can you attract allocation? We'd like to see high quality job creation. We like to see high probability of closing in a timely manner. So a lot of your construction diligence is in place and you have an idea and you have a business plan or a feasibility study that you can bring to us and say, this is actually going to work. We need to see strong community impact. We like to see low default risk. We like to see internal management capacity. And then we like to see a strategy compatibility. So I mentioned there are 300 or so active CDEs across the country. We all have different investment goals and priorities. The Innovate Fund, where I work, we focus on two things. We want to see high quality job creation, and we do a lot of projects that are manufacturing type. So we do projects that are expanding their manufacturing facility or buying equipment in order to start a new line of manufacturing. And then we really like to see health and wellness programs be initiated in communities. So that's where you see more of our community facility type projects. Some of those include community centers, or we worked with the Upward Sports Foundation to create a recreation area for all of their programs and their headquarters. So it really depends on the project. But just because your project doesn't fit with the Innovate Fund's investment priorities doesn't mean that it doesn't meet another CDE's. And we are a tight-knit community of community development entities in this world of new market tax credits. So if it doesn't work for us, we can tell you about our friend next door. And then when is the new market tax credit project ready? We briefly discussed this, but what we're looking at is new markets comes in after you have all of your diligence done. You have your phase one, you have your zoning, you have your site plans and your surveys and your construction contracts and all of the things that go into building a new market tax credit project are essentially what it takes to build any project. But what we can offer is that there are a lot of consultants in the industry who help projects build this due diligence phase and talk about how the new markets is impacting each of these steps. So if I do not provide consulting services, but I work with people who do. So if you think that this is something that a project that you know of would benefit from, I'd be happy to make connections. So leverage is tough. And I'd say that's the most tough part about a project getting off the ground, is finding that 70, 80% balance of the total development cost. So let's talk about some ways we can find it. Well, first is historic tax credits. Virginia tax credits for rehabilitation are 25%. So that's quite high. That ranks in the top in the country. So you can incorporate historic tax credits into these as your leverage. Sponsor equity. We can look at opportunity zone investments. They don't work great as actual direct leverage, but they can work within the same project. It's a little more complicated than what we're going to get into today, but they can work together. Bank loans, of course, are one that we've dived into a bunch. And the Qualic consultants that I spoke about on the last slide, they're here to help you find these leverage lenders. So, don't feel like you're in this alone. We do transactions every day with the same lenders a lot of the time. So we can help you find out who those people are and how to have that conversation. Grants, of course, any sort of grant can help and come into the bucket of leverage. And then this other category, I think, is probably the most interesting and what sets the new market tax credit program apart. Most significantly, any pre-development expenses you have related to the project that have been incurred within a 2-year period prior to closing can be counted as eligible contribution. So you bought the land, it cost you $1 million, and you need $7 million of leverage. Well, as long as you close the deal within 2 years of making that initial purchase, then that $1 million can count toward your $7 million need of leverage. I also have on here tenant improvement contributions. So if you're doing a real estate type project with multiple tenants, the contributions that those tenants bring can count as leverage. Contributed property, so you donate a building or the local government donates you a building or land. And then talking about local government, any sort of locality contribution can count, like a tax incentive financing district, TIF district, or incentives for your taxes or anything like that. We can start talking about and how it fits into this leverage structure. I will skip this section without going into too much detail. There's risk, obviously, in any sort of financial transaction. And the scariest risk that we have in the new market tax credit world is called recapture. So that means basically something would initiate you having to pay back the investor's equity. In the 22 years of this program, this has never happened. So that's why I say we don't have to talk about it very long. But of course, if you're interested in new market tax credits, we would lay out all of these risks. And then I'll briefly touch on this as well. So we go back to this, sorry about that, going back to the slide where we talk about the funding here. Leverage lenders are tough to work with when you're trying to find commercial bank partners, because it's not exactly attractive for a commercial bank partner to want to invest in the new market tax credit structure. For the main reason being, they do not have a direct lien on this piece of property unless they have a direct loan outside of the structure. So if they're only participating within the new market tax credit structure, their security interests are held from the investment fund through the sub CDE to the qualic B. Now that might be beyond what we should talk about today, but just know it's not as easy as going to your banker and saying, hey, I'd really like to do this project. I wish it was. And if it were, please tell me that banker's name and give him my card and let me have his number on speed dial. But there are ways to make banking partners more comfortable with the new market structure. For example, being flexible about allowing them to have a direct loan outside of the structure, or creating essentially a sinking fund to where we can reserve principal payments during that 7-year period. There are ways to make them comfortable. So don't let that dishearten you. I'll go back here. So back to the end though, this is essentially the new market tax credit basics. It goes a lot more deep into detail. So I don't want to say that we've covered everything, but we have scratched the surface. So please let me know if anyone has any questions. I'd be happy to answer, or my email and my phone number are there. If anyone has an idea of a project or you come across someone in your work, please feel free to share my contact information.
Well, thanks, Emma. I appreciate that. And we've got a question here from Emily. You just mentioned that a donated building or tenant improvements could be included in the leverage. But earlier, you were saying the new market tax credits are exclusively for new real estate construction.
Okay, I might have misspoke. I'm sorry if I said that earlier. We can do any sort of real estate project. So it's not only new construction. A significant portion of new market tax credit projects, significant portion, are rehabilitation of old buildings. So a great example in our community is the Bristol Hotel, which was a project done by People Incorporated with allocation. I'm sure we all remember what the Bristol Hotel building was prior to its beautiful glory today. But that was a new market tax credit project that I'm not sure if the building were contributed or anything, but it was a rehabilitation. So new market tax credits have anything to do with real estate, not exclusively new real estate. Any sort of rehab can definitely be counted.
Okay. She said, thanks. I have a question. What do you think is the biggest myth about new market tax credits from people that?
Oh, interesting. Maybe it's that's a good question. The biggest myth of new market tax credits, I would think, is that it's an inaccessible program. As you can see, it's complicated. It's not something that you're going to start on tomorrow and finish up in 2 weeks from now. It is a complicated structure, but I believe that there are a lot of people in the industry who are out to help you and help you figure out how to walk through the process to where it doesn't have to be a daunting process that's unable to be accessed for many communities. I will make a plug right here for the Opportunity Appalachia program. I'm not sure if you all have heard of this. It is currently ongoing via the Opportunity Appalachia is hosting this program. It's an ARC power grant, essentially. But what they're doing is providing technical assistance funds for communities or businesses who would like to expand using new market tax credits or opportunity zones or historics. So if you Google Opportunity Appalachia, they have a great website. It will come up, and they are going through a process of offering these technical assistance monies. But essentially, what my point is, there are definitely people and organizations in this world of development finance who are there to help you with education, there to help you with financing. So, take advantage of those things. Take advantage of Opportunity Appalachia. Take advantage of, having a CDE in your community and people who can offer advice.
Emma, so one other question. I actually had to mute everything so that I could answer a telephone call. I just had a phone call from a gal that wants to open some kind of business in Abingdon, and she was asking about grant funds. Is there, when you talk about, obviously new market tax credits are large projects, but when you say Opportunity Appalachia, is that something that I could have referred her to or to you?
Opportunity Appalachia is still wanting the final end result to be a development project. It
Okay.
could be, a small equipment purchase for a company. That certainly, I think, is something they're counting as eligible. But all of these programs that I'm working and revolving around are certainly leading to some sort of development, whether that be business expansion on a large scale or building development.
Very good. Well, I certainly appreciate everything that you've told us about this today, and it gave me a little better understanding of new market tax credits. I've served on a lot of committees over the years, and occasionally, I'll hear that term and I, didn't totally understand, and probably still don't totally understand, but I've got a better understanding of that. And I really appreciate you spending your time today to help us out. Folks, Sandy is going to are you going to share the slides? Can you share the slides with Sandy so that if folks want the slides, they can kind of refer back to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I can make those available. And please, if anyone has any questions, give me a call.
Okay. Well, so thank you, Emma. It was very nice to meet you, even if it was on Zoom. And I appreciate everything that you've done to help us out today.
And Emma, I also want to say thank you for your time and expertise. We could not do this program without folks like yourself who donating your time and your talents and knowledge to share with individuals. I know that it takes a while to put a presentation together, so thank you for doing that. And if you will share that with me, I'll share it with the folks that attended today. I do want to put a plug in for our next New Knowledge session. It will be held on April the 6th, and it will be focused on what social media channels should I use for my business organization. And it will be led by Ryan Jones with Do Good Brands. Ryan is a Hayside native, but now lives in Pikeville, Kentucky, but has a lot of experience building brands and working with social media. And I'm also want to share a screen. Virginia Community Capital, we have a workshop next week. Bring that up on Friday, April the 1st at 10 a.m. at the Bristol Public Library. It'll be focused on community and economic development financial resources. You had mentioned about opportunity zones. Our leader of our opportunity zone will be there to talk about that and some of the other programs that are available. So that is free, and it'll be from 10 to 12 at the Bristol Public Library. So I hope you can attend that session. And if you want me to send you the registration information via email, just let me know or send me a note. Again, thanks so much for your time and being a community supporter for this program. So I hope to see everybody again and be a blessing to somebody today. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.